Good morning, everyone. This is a big crowd, so we're used to about 20 or 30% of this crowd. So anyway, welcome. My name is Jeff Cleveringa. I am the head of orchard operations for Columbia Fruit, and I'm an area orchard manager as well. So we have about 3,500 acres of apples and cherries that we farm in Washington State. Sorry for my accent. But I oversee about 1,000 of that myself, and then I work with the other area managers to help improve production across the company wide. Our sales desk is CMI Orchards. It's a group of 4 warehouses that market through one marketing desk. And then the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission is a industry organization that self-taxed themselves starting 55 years ago to further research into whether it's insect, pest, disease, technology, all things that could help improve production for growers in the state of Washington. And currently that's about a $4 million annual budget that we spend on research from that self-imposed tax on ourselves. And so I sit on that commission and I chair the technology subcommittee of that. So I was asked to talk about what's separating successful growers in Washington with unsuccessful growers. We are in a real economic downturn in the apple industry right now in Washington, and I'll get into that. So this is what a typical couple weeks will look like for me. We get these portfolios thrown on our desk to look through to see if we are interested in investing or acquiring any of these orchards. Farmers are losing money at a really high rate. There's a lot of bleeding going on. I say that we have a severed artery, not a cut. And so we are losing money. And growers, even really fantastic growers, this one right here, I've known this orchard for a lot of years. They are great growers, high density, new varieties, but they bought out one of the family members and then expanded too quickly, and cash is a problem for them. So the real answer here is access to cash. That's really what's separating those growers. So we'll dive into that a little bit further. So this is where we find ourselves in Washington. About a decade ago, there was probably 10 to 20% of the orchards grown in the state of Washington were owned by private equity venture money, and that has now flipped. We're at about 70% currently of venture owned. This is all of the different investment groups that you will see on Wall Street and other investors, and they are acquiring orchards in the state of Washington. They have access to cash. So my group, we were acquired by Goldman Sachs 2 years ago. So my friends say, who do you work for? I tell them Goldman Sachs. They live in New York, in downtown New York City. They do not know anything about orchards or farming. So we get the pleasure of trying to explain to them how farming goes. So that is, all of our free time is consumed doing that when we're actually not farming. So where are we now in Washington State for production? These are in 18 kilogram boxes. So you can kind of see down at the bottom, our August 1 estimate before we started harvest was 124 million. So we thought, okay, this is going to be reasonable. We carried 10 million over from the previous year's crop because we picked way too much. So we picked 136 million boxes the year previous, which is about a good 10 million more than we can really market in a year due to some trade restrictions and a strong dollar. And so we're finding ourselves having to shove that onto the North American market. Carrying 10 million over, we're like, well, we're gonna kind of be in the same boat. So here we go again, another year of really low pricing. So this is the United States holdings, and you can see the United States holdings are also up about 10 million boxes. So we thought, well, we're going to add that to the pile. It's going to put us on par with last year, which was a disastrous year. The latest figure actually showed our November 1 storage report that we do for industry showed that we're actually going to pick about 132 million. So we're about 8 million up. And then you add the 10. Now we're back to where we are going to be a full-on overlap with last year. So we're all a little bit nervous. The variety mix didn't come out super great in that number either because it's very heavy to Gala, Pink Lady, and Granny Smith, which were overproduced previously. So the production, a little bit of what we're seeing by variety. For the scary number here that just keeps climbing is this other varieties thing, and I'll tell you why that's scary here in a minute. But if you look at variety mix going down through Washington and the United States, this is all U.S. holdings. That other number keeps climbing, and it keeps climbing as retailers are shrinking the number of SKUs that they're willing to carry in a store. So we're facing a lot of pressure. So some of these varieties listed over here will likely cease to exist in the next 5 years, and some will be winners. Now, what do you pick, right? The million-dollar question, and truly a million-dollar question. So here's what we're working on in Washington. Pulling out orchards, grinding up trees. Now we have some open ground. Help for oversupply. Well, so we think. So this is what we think we're getting it right. But we just talked about who the new owners in town are. The new owners in town are the private equity groups. They have no interest in open ground in their portfolio. So we pull it, and then this is one of my ranches. We pulled out that orchard. We planted new orchard. This is Honeycrisp. This is the end of the first year on Honeycrisp. And this is one of my Kanzi blocks, organic Kanzi that we farm. So we're just moving the needle farther, or kicking the ball farther down the road of production. So we're not really getting rid of anything. We're actually getting rid of old blocks that are producing low volumes for new blocks that are producing high volumes. So we are in a real predicament, and we shall see what happens, but we're definitely in an overproduction cycle. No one's really sure what's going to fix this. So when I say we're losing money, this is what we're really losing. So these are actual numbers. For our company, we lost around $130 for every bin that we produced company-wide average across the board last year. So we pick a lot of bins on those 3,500 acres. So this equates to about $6,500 for every orchardist in Washington State lost that per acre last year. So what that really, so it's 200 Australian dollars per bin. This is operating costs only, so just my annual operating costs. So basically what we did was we attached $130 in cash to every bin that we sent to retail to thank them for taking our apples. So that's a little bit of a rough go for us if you just think that every bin coming out has $130 laying in it that you don't get. So rough start, rough go. That's why we're really nervous about what the next year brings. Okay, so this is probably one of the slides that you'll want to pay attention to as we get through it. What does the successful grower look like? So we're talking about losing $130 a bin, but not everyone is in that boat. That's the average. So there's winners that are above it, and there's losers that are below it. So I've got some guys I know that are picking Red Delicious right now, or Red Dells as you call them. Last year, they returned $5 a bin back to the farm at the end of packing. They paid the person $28 a bin to pick it. So real loss, big money. So the successful growers, this is what I see when I look around the industry and I look at those that are still acquiring neighbors and still planting more orchards. And it's not just access to cash. Yes, that's the simple answer, but this is what they're doing. They have high quality orchards with really good production numbers. They kept up with the planting trends of renewing a decade ago. And right now they're kind of all done renewing for this round. And so they've got high production blocks in production. They've often diversified their portfolio. They have some cherries, they have some pears, and they probably guessed on one of these other varieties and they picked a winner. Not everybody picked a winner. You didn't know what the future held. You picked a variety that you thought consumers would like and you went with it. So they picked a winner. They're also doing hard things like growing organically. We have a higher demand for organics. It seems to keep moving up. It's flattened a little bit this year, but generally we get a pretty good price disparity between conventionally farmed and organically farmed. And so for me, about 20% of my apple acres are organic and the other 80% are conventionally farmed. But they've done it with hard varieties like Honeycrisp. Honeycrisp is a really hard variety, doesn't like to grow very well, and it really likes to biennial bear. So they've done it with these hard varieties and they've figured out how to do it. They've added precision crop load management. Precision crop load management starts at pruning time. If you're saying that tree needs 100 apples or 150 apples or whatever that number is that you can hang on that tree and produce a really nice crop at the end of high quality, high production, we're pruning to get ourselves very close to that number. So on my ranches, my managers, we do 15% additional buds to what we need for crop load. So if that tree is doing 100 apples at the end, if we've counted our spacing and it can hang 100 apples, we're leaving 115 fruiting sites behind. Now the other thing we do is that we look at buds for return bloom. So in the winter, we slice buds and we look at vegetative versus fruit buds, and we'll factor that in. So if we've got 15% that are blank, then we'll add that to that number for the final number so that we know we've got 115 fruiting sites per tree. So we're working on that. My managers are getting very good at executing on that and getting the pruners to do that. So we don't count to 100 ever in a tree, never happens, except for the checker. They are the only ones that ever count to 100 with their clicker. We break it down into quadrants within the trellis, and we say this quadrant is 8 apples, 10 apples, 6, whatever that quadrant needs. So we break it down to where we never count beyond 10, because a human eye can look at something and say that's about 10 and be really close. When you get to 15, the human eye looks at that and you can't just throw out a number that's close. So we figured this out with our crews, so we're working it down to where the person pruning, on day number 1, we count buds. Day number 2, they know how it goes and they don't count anymore, and they get very, very close and very good. We pruned a bud count. We're spending more money per acre on pruning a little bit, but we're saving money on other things. You do have to get good at dormant bud analysis. That is a truthful thing. But we are reducing our hand thinning bill per acre. So originally we didn't think that that was going to be the case, but you get better with chemical thinning when you only have to take every cluster on the tree down to doubles, and you're great. The hard thing with chemical thinning is that I want this cluster gone, I want this one a double, this one needs to be gone, this one's a double. Like, you will drive yourself nuts trying to get one cluster to stick 2s and the next cluster to stick a 0. If you're leaving 2x the number of fruiting sites on your tree, that's what the math says. One has to be 0, one has to be whatever your target was. So we're reducing our hand thinning bill by getting down to that, because we're getting really good at chemical thinning, because we don't any longer have to swing for the home run of doing that, knocking off whole clusters off the tree, because we want every site that we've left behind to hang at least 1 apple, maybe 2. So they started raising their production number by growing fewer premiums. So in Washington, we've taken your class 1 and we break it down into 3 subgroups of class 1. We start off with a Washington Extra Fancy Premium, a Washington Extra Fancy number 1, and a Washington Extra Fancy number 2. The only separation of those is the amount of color on the apple. So if you want to buy a premium, you're getting basically a full red colored apple. And we used to get paid a premium to do that, and it was worth it. So you hang singles, great sunlight exposure, all the things you have to do to get that great color, because it was worth it. The market rewarded you for that. That's not the case any longer. The new grade standard that we're starting to consider, and we're not doing it all on, but we are considering is that the retailers in the United States, so we're down to about 7 major apple buyers in the United States. You guys have 2 here. You probably have a few little ones, but you have 2 major apple buyers. What their grade standard is the new grade standard. So I may come back here in 10 years and tell you guys that we're doing everything by class 1 only and made our life simpler. So we'll have 1 class of apples, not 4 classes of apples. So we are starting to hang a lot of doubles to get our production numbers up because, again, I don't need that perfect red color. I've got to get enough red color to make the retailer grade standard. The other thing that this successful grower did not do was they did not automate their orchard with the latest technology too early. That's a little bit of a trap because at this point, when you don't have a lot of cash, the new technology may be really good and really useful, but it's got to be repeatable and reliable. And so we used to do some of this stuff on our own, and we would kind of trial and test things a little bit and spend some extra money because we had extra money. We've kind of stopped doing that. So the early adopters, they're not getting the reward. The profitability, you don't have it to train and trial. So the testing and trialing needs to be done by the technology company. So the industry is taking on more of that role, not the individual grower. And I don't have money to pay for these guys to test their technology on my farm. I will collaborate, but I can't pay. So don't get overextended on cash flow. This is really the killer. Cash is king. I have a grower 30 years ago when I came into this industry. He was like, Jeff, always remember that cash is king. There's 2 rules. Number 1, cash is king. Number 2, cash is still king. So that was his advice. Okay, so this is another exercise that our company did. We came through and we said, what is our variety mix compared to what our retailers are buying? So we want to align ourselves with industry and with what our retailers are purchasing from us. So we went all of our varieties. This is conventional. If you see the OG, that's organic. And we just went across. The yellow basically means that we are very close to alignment with our retailers. So if you look at Honeycrisp, you have orange, red, red. That's because if you look over here, we're at 11.8% as a marketing group. Walmart's purchases of Honeycrisp conventional are 17%. Kroger is 32%. And Nielsen data is what all retailers report. So they report their data. This Nielsen company purchases the data from retailers to report it out so you can buy the data back from Nielsen Group, and it will tell you in general what is all of retail in the United States doing. And so that gives us a data point because Costco is the other one, and Costco is the major retailer that does not report to Nielsen. They will not share their data. So Costco data is not in the Nielsen data. So you kind of have to extract it out a little bit based on your other big retail accounts. So this was an exercise we did. So you can see we're under-indexed in that. We are actually under-indexed in Gala compared to what Walmart buys, but we're pretty close on Kroger. And the Nielsen data says that we are actually a little bit under-indexed in that. But price on Gala has been a little low, so that's not super exciting. If you come down here, let's see. Let's look at Ambrosia. Ambrosia was a club variety that one of the group members of our group had the exclusive for North America or for the United States to grow and market it. It went off patent about 3 years ago, and a bunch of people started planting orchards of it like crazy because they were making good money. And it was about a 2 million box market, and it quickly got produced to 3.2 million cartons with no extra market being developed. So it has crashed. And so there is a lot of it in storage from last year that basically had to get dumped because there was no home for it and nobody would take it. So we are way over indexed on that compared to all of our retailers. So just a little something to maybe look at or talk to your packing houses or your sales desk to see how you're indexed compared to the rest of the industry. So now some of the fun stuff. So that was kind of the boring stuff. Let's move on to some fun stuff. This is technology that we are interested in or trialing. This is the Prosper machine from Robotics Plus out of New Zealand. We purchased 2 of these machines this year, and they have been working quite fantastically for us. So I really, yeah, there's some new startup stuff that, little things that break that you don't count on, but in general, this thing has been really good. I have a young H2A worker. Our H2A is our guest worker program, so I have a young guest worker. He's about 23 years old, and he runs these for me. He brings the spray to them. The nice thing is that it will, in the middle roadway, we can tell it if you can't make it to the bottom and back, stop with the load of spray you have. We'll refill you and we'll resume so that we don't have to chase it down and figure out where it ran out of spray. It already knows, and it will stop in the middle roadway and wait for us to add spray to it. So one day I was out there and I pulled up and he was washing the sprayer. He had filled it with water and was just running it in circles, washing itself. So that's his little car wash he was doing to clean it off. And he kind of was like, oh, I got caught. And I'm like, nah, you're fine. Like, it's kind of funny, actually. So I took a little video of him doing that. This is it spraying. So each fan is adjustable by flow and by air speed. So I can adjust that as well when we set up for a block. And then the system, I've got on this ranch, I've got both vertical wall and V-trellis. And so the system was designed to just move a fan real quick and be off and doing the other one. So we really don't redo anything. The calibrations are all built in the program when we tell it a mission. This is one thing that our university developed it's a technology that's been around for a while. We've been using it for probably 10 years. But what it is, it's called the pollen tube growth model. And it tells me once the bee has visited that flower, based on temperature, how fast did that pollen grow down the tube and fertilize that ovary. We use lime sulfur and not ATS. ATS burns the top of the stigmatic surface to prevent pollination. Lime sulfur actually burns the whole pollen tube. So you have to know how your blossom thinner works. So what we do is we measure the style length, we put it into the model, and then it over here tells us when we should spray. So it comes up, we got up to 80% of the model, and we said spray. We don't want any more than that, so we are out counting flowers to get to that 100 fruiting sites that are open with a bloom. We start the model, it says spray, we spray, the model starts back over and it starts accumulating, and then it accumulates, we get up here again and we spray, and the model resets, it gets up here, we spray, because as soon as we start crossing this red line, we start setting more fruit than what we had counted on. Yes?
How long a period is that?
You can see the dates. These are the actual dates down here. So the last spray occurred on June 3, and the first spray occurred on April, looks like 23. So that's the time period across all of this. So this has been fantastic, especially for organics. Without this, I don't know how we would do organics. It would just be guess. Because when temperatures change, the model speeds up or slows up depending on the day-night temperatures. Okay, so as an industry, I mentioned that we were doing a lot of the testing and trialing of this new technology because growers are having trouble affording it. And so as an industry, we were fishing in little ponds and we were catching little fish for technology. We had to move to a much bigger body of water to catch bigger fish. That led us to this Smart Orchard project. So we started off in 2020, starting the Smart Orchard project, where we were just trying to put good data to information gathering things. So what was happening was, if you looked at your computer, you'd have a tab open for your soil moisture probe, you'd have a tab open for your codling moth catch, you'd have a tab open for all the different things that occurred in your orchard. We wanted to put them all in one and layer them into a management system. And so we started off with that project. This was one of our latest field days. Lots of young people come to this. We test and trial new technology as well as a showcase a lot of the companies that are in this Smart Orchard. So one way for the industry to trial and test this, We at first thought we were going to have to buy all of the technology, the soil moisture probes and leaf sensors and sunburn sensors and all those things, but the companies were like, no, like, you're going to test this for us? Here it is. And they just handed it to us, even though their competitor was in the same row type of stuff. So really fantastic. It's really been a great thing to partner with the university and get science done behind this as well. This led us to a bigger thing called Orchard of the Future. This is an international group now. So we've now left the state of Washington and now we're part of an international. This is mostly with the Dutch, even though there's now German and Italian companies that are trying to join this with us. But we are trying to, again, digitize all decision-making in the orchard and gather data from to help us make better decisions as well. This is one of the things that came from this. This is a gripper that they are developing in the Netherlands because pears, you can't just pull them off the tree, you got to pick them. So they're coming up with some new ways. This will actually be this next season in the field, mounted on a robot, picking pears. This is their prototype. They actually built the whole thing out, just one arm, and they were picking pears, but they're gonna redo it to make it a little bit more commercial. A little bit of my background, I started with Picker Technologies. As I was managing farms, a group said, let's get together and figure out how to harvest apples. We're like, sounds great, we're all having the same problem. So we partnered with Oxbow Corporation and we built this behemoth of an apple harvester, we called it. It had tubes in the front that the pickers would put their apples in as fast as they could. It had a commercial scanning and sorting system on it. So we could sort out hail marks, culls, any other things we could sort out if we wanted. We could hold the culls there. The good fruit went into a bin filler in the back and it would empty bin in the front, full bin out the back. What we found out is that in a high density orchard, the picker's already really, really fast and really, really good, and we couldn't make them very much faster. So they can pick about an apple every other second. That's about as fast as they can go. They can't do that all day long either, so the math gets a little fuzzy because they get tired and slow down slightly, and maybe it's every 3 seconds in a really good picking. But we spent a lot of money, learned a lot of things, and now have a really big boat anchor. So that was 2006. We fast forward to here, and we find ourselves that there's many companies coming trying to help us automate apple harvest. When we get something that's close, we kind of shove them off the cliff into Death Valley. That means that you've proven out that your technology works. Now you got to get yourself commercially hardened and ready for the industry. And that's where all the investors just disappear. They don't want that burden. So we're struggling as an industry. We're trying to seek some government funds and stuff to get us there. This is some other technology. This is the Mooncough 3-row spray system. I had one of these 2 years ago. We tested it for a year. We ended up not purchasing it, but you fly the orchard with a drone. It maps the orchard and the canopy, and then you can adjust the spray volume based on canopy on the go as it moves. But this system produces a really nice mist, but in Washington, we are so dry and arid. We are in a desert, a true desert. We get like 7 inches of total precipitation a year. So we bring in all of our water from the river through a canal system, a very large river and a very large canal system to feed a million acres. And that's how we do it. So you'll see this thing creates a really nice mist. You'll see it go off and on as it's following the program as it moves through the orchard. But we were finding that it really didn't hit the trees very well. It evaporated before it got there. So in a desert system, it didn't work so well. These are some other groups that we are testing and trialing. We've been working a lot with vision-based systems to help us make decisions. We talked about that decision making. And the vision-based systems really for the grower, there's 2 times of the year that will make you money. And that is counting buds left behind from my pruning crew and counting apples for my thinning crew. Those are the only 2 times of the year that I get to make money with scouting and telling myself about the apples on the tree. The rest of it, the marketing guys are super interested in, but they want me to pay. And I'm like, sorry guys, if you want, you're gonna have to start to pay to get this data if you want it because I can't afford it anymore. So we are using these technologies to give us that data, like if we were supposed to leave 115 buds a tree, what's the crew actually doing? So at the end of the day, I can run up and down the rows and I can give the manager a report by row that will tell him, you need to work with these 6 people because they're at 140 buds per tree. These people are at 80. You need to work with them. The rest of them are all within the tolerance range and we're good to go. So we're going to be using this technology to better give ourselves data for our crew bosses to work with the individual people. So we'll know which row. We're also doing Phytech, which has taught us a lot about when is the right time to water for when the tree needs it. So you can see it, just a reloop of that video. Okay, some intermediary technology. So before we get to full harvest automation, here is some intermediary stuff we've been testing and trialing. This is a Revo platform. It did not work for us in Washington. So that's all I'm gonna say. I have some, if you can figure out how to get a container, I can put them in them for you and send them back here for you. So they didn't work for us. Our crew did not like them, and they were causing some fruit issues. So we trialed some other platforms, but this is really the one that we've landed on. These are made actually in Washington State. They're just a flat platform. The crew is tethered to it with a harness system that they just wear around their waist. And so it's been really fantastic for the crew. They love it. We actually pick on it. I think I have like 15 or 18 of these now, and we do consolidate them all to one ranch at harvest time. And that ranch, we only have a few blocks left that we actually use ladders in. Pretty much everything is done. If you think you're gonna hire a crew, put them on a platform and reduce your harvest cost, I am gonna tell you that after years of trialing this, it's not gonna happen. So then you're like, why would I buy a platform if it's not gonna make my crew any faster, my costs any lower? What we weren't doing was when we set a piece rate to go into the block, we set a piece rate to go into the block and pick. The crew needs a piece rate at this amount. The people on the ground are super fast. So we were punishing the crew on the platform because they couldn't get as many bins a day as the guys just walking on the ground and picking. So we lowered the price per bin to the crew on the ground because they just picked everything from the head high down. The platform had already done the rest. And we now are saving money per bin by doing it this way. So we just had to rethink how the math went because it didn't work the other way for us. We thought, our crew, no ladders, this is gonna get faster, we're gonna spend less. Didn't actually, it was about a flat line. But the guys on the ground, super fast because they don't carry anything except a picking bag and apples. So they just roll. Okay, so picking a fruit, we thought it was gonna be easy. Conveyance, there's a lot of things that you have to get right, and a lot of them are vision system based and access to the fruit. This is Advanced Farm. They are very close, I am telling you, to having robotic apple harvesting. They will have, this is in my orchard, they will have machines for me next year that we are pre-commercialized trying, and in 2026, they plan to have a couple machines that I can purchase from them. So they are getting it right. This is how they do it. They have a suction cup, pulls the apple, puts it on the machine. Really, really good technology, and it's been really gentle on the fruit as well. So the last season when they were testing with me, they were struggling to not damage fruit going into the bin. We'll go over some pack out data that we ran with them, but this machine is getting it done. So they're dropping a few too many apples. I have every gram of faith in them that they'll fix that this winter and come back next spring and drop way fewer apples. They acquire them, and then something's occurring that's causing them to drop, but they're doing really well. So then we got to get the horticulture right, which means accessibility. These machines don't come in on the backside of a limb, pick an apple, and come back around. That's too slow and too complex. They need access to the apples, so if you can walk through and visually see them, they can pick them. So these are 2 blocks. This is a block of Kanzi, and this is another club variety over here that I've been working with for years to really keep my production numbers good, but get my accessibility of fruit. So I call it a 2.5 dimensional tree, because I think 2-dimensional is too hard to keep your production numbers up. It's very, very hard. I need a little bit of depth on that canopy in order to keep my production numbers high. Cross supports and those kind of things in a V trellis, there's too much backside and behind wires. And that's gonna be a lot longer down the road before we're gonna be able to access that fruit. So we talked about pack out data and cull analysis. This is some Kanzi. We ran 23 bins from the machine, and only 2% of those were damaged by the robot. Here's the comparison with my crew. So here's my manual crew, same block, different rows, just they were picking as well. Here's the line that you're interested in. This is robot caused damage at 2% for the people and 2% for the machine. And this is pack out data. When I get a pack out, which I get it on my email every single day for every grower at the warehouse, they just auto send it out to the list of people. Because of my management role in the company, I get every grower's pack out so I can compare and see how they're doing compared to myself and our company orchards. But this is all the things listed on a pack out sheet. They do 100 apples as QC on the line. They go over to the cull line. They pull 100 apples off of the cull belt, and then they grade them out. And that's my percentage of culls. So I know what my culls are, and I get this. I can show you one if you're interested or whatever, but anything basically that is a cull in the state of Washington shows up on this list, and there's a number behind it if I had an apple in that category. So this is just what they're measuring. This doesn't tell you the percentage, but you can see them up here. So the only difference in cullage was that my crew was told that if you pick an apple with a bird peck or bitter pitter, an obvious cull, throw it on the ground. The robot did not do that. They will build that into their platform next year to do that. So that we should be running real close together. This is another group. I got to keep going a little quicker, but this is Agtonomy. They fly a drone over your block, map it, and they deploy autonomous equipment. It is about that fast. It's a one-day deployment. It's crazy, scary good. Like, this is like Tesla, full auto. You take your hands off the wheel and there is no drivers on these things. So this one is mowing in an orchard. They came up and did a demo. This is actually mowing. They've got diesel and electric versions of this. The electric version is 120 horsepower, and it has a very large battery pack that it carries on the 3-point. You can set the battery somewhere, a fresh charged one, tell it where it is, and it will go swap its own battery and resume its own mission on its own. No person interaction. Crazy. So my thought is we'll just mow at night. Set the mower, everybody's gone, put up a few signs, and we'll go find it in the morning. Wherever she is. If it stopped because it had an obstacle, we'll just resume from that point on. But if it can change its own battery, a battery pack's 8 hours of mowing, so that's 16 hours that thing could run. So, super interested in this technology. We will likely be a player in 2026. They're going to be demoing more of it. This is the machine with a mower on the front and a under tree weeder on the bottom. Because they GPS mark every trunk, they will be able to tell the weeder where the trunk is and to miss it by ½ an inch. It will not touch the trees, the under tree weeder. This block, they weren't using it because they had drip hose laying on the ground. You can't under tree weed if you have drip hose laying on the ground. Eats it right up. Okay, so this is the thing we were talking about with new varieties and the scariness. You have to have ways to test how to store it because you don't want CO2 damage internally. I can't use high waste apples. I can't throw that many on the ground. There's no margin of error unless that apple is gold. I can't do it. It has to be made of gold in order to do that. So what we're finding is, like I said earlier, retailers are taking us down to about 5 to 6 SKUs. They are looking at their data from their customers and they're picking the winners, and that's how it goes. And so the number is shrinking. If you think of how many varieties are out there, there's a lot of pressure on us growers to figure it out because they're not interested. We just had one of our varieties that we grow as part of a club. We got a call from the retailers that take it. There was 3 retailers that take it from us. All 3 of them called us and said that this year they will take 0 boxes. Next year they will take 0 boxes, and going forward they will take 0 boxes. Well, I already picked them. So now we have a problem. So now we're trying to figure out, I got a warehouse with a bunch of these in. What are we going to do? So bad news, but I'm glad they were honest. Just had they done it at the beginning of the season, would have made my life easier, but that's how it goes. And we can't have apples that do those kind of things. I'm not even sure how that made it out of a breeding program. Okay, so how are we going to stand out in a crowd real quickly? This is a display of apples. I was here looking at one of the club varieties that was out, and every single row in here behind a black sign is a variety of apples. Whew! If you're the consumer that walked up to that display, hopefully you don't have OCD issues because you will probably just leave. But if you were there with a list of certain apples that you were going to buy, doggone it, this is what you're going to walk up to. And you're going to have to tell me which is which, right? So they're all starting to look alike, and that's one of the issues we're running into. I tell the apple breeders, I need a blueberry blue apple, and I am your customer instantly. But until you get that, it's going to be hard. So this is Sugar Bee. It's a Honeycrisp offspring. This is Karma. It's a Honeycrisp offspring. This is Evercrisp. It's a Honeycrisp offspring. This is Pink Lady. So there's your Pink Ladies, all nice and glossy from our wax. Here's some Fuji over here and some Granny Smith right there. So Granny Smith stands out, but we went and overproduced it as a state. So now we have to pay penance for a while here until we get our production numbers back to where they go. So best wishes for the coming season. I would say stay current on market trends, grow high quality fruit, but at a really reasonable price. And tough times are a great way to rethink what we do. So I am rethinking every task in the orchard that we are currently doing with my managers, because we've got to cut the things that don't really make us money. If it's not making money, if there's no return on that investment, even if it's pennies per time we do it, we got to get rid of it. So these are just some of the fun things we get to run across as managers. So snow on some cherry beehives, apples that are organic that you got to pick off because they got codling moth stings, and so then you got to bag them and put them out in the sun so they burn up and the codling moth die. This is a de-leafer. We do a lot of de-leafing, and this is all tree clips that they threw into a bin that all tangled with each other, and they're like, we'll just lift them out. So the axe is holding them all from falling while they still cling to the bin. So just I'm like, okay, guys, like we can't do that. So anyway, thank you.